Good evening, everyone. Welcome, everyone. Bienvenidos, bienvenidas. Vamos a comenzar en 2 o 3 minutos. We'll begin in 2 or 3 minutes. Thank you so much for coming to today's Venezuela Solidarity Network, ALBA Movimientos, and CODEPINK webinar. For today's webinar, we have interpretation. You will see the instructions on the screen for how to turn on simultaneous interpretation. I apologize, the instructions are only in English or Spanish, but today we have English, Spanish, and Portuguese interpretation. To turn it on, you can find the globe icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen and select your preferred language. If you have any questions, we can suggest troubleshooting options in the chat. Greetings and solidarity, everyone. My name is Allison Bodine, and I am calling from Vancouver, Canada, from the unceded territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. I encourage people to post in the chat where they are joining us from and any acknowledgement of the unceded lands or stolen Indigenous lands that you also may be calling from. My name again is Allison Bodine. I'm a founding member of the Venezuela Solidarity Network, or VSN, and coordinator of Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice's Venezuela Solidarity Campaign here in Vancouver, Canada. I want to acknowledge that as we defend Venezuela's right to self-determination, we also stand with Indigenous nations across this continent and defend their right to self-determination. In addition to introducing yourself in the chat should also be available if you would like to post any messages of solidarity. We ask that you post any questions you may have for our panelists in the Q&A box so that we can more easily find them. I will also make a last-minute reminder to all of our panelists tonight that we do have trilingual interpretation made possible by Ali, Natalie, Jill, and Giselle, and we can do them a big favor by speaking slowly tonight. As we gather here, Venezuela continues to be in the crosshairs of the US war machine. US missile strikes against small boats off of Venezuela's coast or even in the Pacific Ocean have already murdered at least and more than 40 people in flagrant violation of US and international laws. Since August 2025, the Pentagon has rapidly expanded its military presence in the Caribbean, sending warships, fighter jets, and 10,000 troops to the region. The United States is increasing its attacks against Venezuela and positioning itself for wars and occupations elsewhere in Latin America and the Caribbean. In response, people across Latin America, the Caribbean, and the world are standing up in defense of Venezuela's sovereignty and self-determination, are mobilizing, are educating, and are starting to become more united in our actions in defense of Venezuela. Today's webinar is one of monthly webinars organized by the Venezuela Solidarity Network, which formed in the end of 2023. We're a new North America-based network of organizations and individuals working to defend Venezuela's sovereignty and self-determination against US-led unilateral coercive measures or sanctions, attacks, and this new expanded Trump military war drive in Latin America and the Caribbean. You can see more about the Venezuela Solidarity Network and join at venezuelasolidaritynetwork.org. Today we have an excellent program of voices representing those that are on the front lines of defending Venezuela's sovereignty and self-determination, coming from Cuba, Venezuela, Colombia, and Cuba, Venezuela, and Colombia. And Palestine, excuse me. And we are excited to hear their perspectives, especially about this US war drive and what we can do to strengthen our solidarity with the Venezuelan people at this time. We have with us Adriana Chavez Alava, who is here from Venezuela. Fernando Rojas is here from Cuba, but has submitted a video due to multiple complications, including the fact that a hurricane has just hit the island of Cuba, Hurricane Melissa, and we stand with Cuba as they recover from this hurricane under a US blockade, but it makes joining Zoom additionally difficult when it is already difficult for Cubans. Watan Jamil Alabed, Dr. Watan, who is here joining us as a Palestinian trained at the Latin American School of Medicine in Cuba, and Laura Capote from Colombia, joining us from ALBA Movimientos. We will have these four speakers. Then we will have time for a Q&A. And then we're looking forward to hearing greetings from people that have joined the call from numerous organizations who wanted to share their solidarity with Venezuela at this important moment. Then most importantly, we will focus our discussion on next steps. What are we going to do to build and unite collective action and mobilization in defense of Venezuela at this critical time? So I really appreciate everyone coming here today and joining us. Again, there is interpretation. If you've just joined, we can post in the chat about how to activate that, or you can ask us questions if you're not sure. Today's webinar is not only brought by the Venezuela Solidarity Network, but also co-sponsored with ALBA Movimientos and CODEPINK. So thank you to those two organizations as well. Without further ado, let's start our program. Adriana Chavez Alava is a Venezuelan journalist based in Caracas, serving as a staff writer for VenezuelaAnalysis.com. The Venezuela Solidarity Network has really been honored to closely collaborate with Adriana to help us sharpen our analysis about what's happening on the ground in Venezuela. And we're looking forward very much to your remarks today. Thank you, Adriana.
Thank you so much, Alison. And I just want to say thank you to everyone in the Venezuela Solidarity Network for continuing to open this space for people to, and also just because we defend the truth of Venezuela against the lies that the United States is trying to impose. And we all know that the US government is a pathological liar. So I just want to say that today when I was preparing for this webinar, I was thinking about what to say regarding the potential war against Venezuela with the US military either invading or attacking our country. And I was thinking about this and I was looking outside my window and I was seeing how people are just living their normal lives. They are going to work, they are buying groceries, they are walking their dogs. And, it just seems like a normal country right now. And it really hit me at that moment that, of course, Venezuelans have already survived unimaginable conditions because of US sanctions. We already know what it is to live and to survive war-like conditions because we've been under US sanctions for almost a decade. Um, and I'm not saying that we are prepared for anything worse. We know how catastrophic uh, an invasion or military attack against Venezuela would be for our people and for the entire Latin American and Caribbean region. But I think it's important to never forget that how punishing and criminal sanctions are and continue to be. It is important to uh, remember that sanctions are an act of genocide. According to a research by United Nations experts and by the Center for Economic and Policy Research, more than 100,000 Venezuelans have died because of US sanctions. I mean, if you think about that number, the only way that we can frame that is in the context of a genocide, a silent genocide against the Venezuelan people inflicted to us through sanctions. And I was actually reading the recent report that the Cuban government produced about the devastating consequences of the blockade against Cuba. And I was struck by this quote by the Foreign Affairs Minister, Bruno Rodriguez, and I'm going to read it to you. He said, "It is impossible to quantify the emotional damage, anguish, suffering, and deprivation that the blockade causes Cuban families. This has been the case for several generations, with more than 80% of Cubans on the island born after the blockade began." And that's what really struck me because I keep thinking, how can we speak about a potential war against Venezuela or a potential war against Cuba? We have been at war. Cuba has been living a war for more than 60 years with completely negative and devastating and horrifying consequences for the Cuban people. Venezuela has been living something very similar for the last 8 years, almost a decade. So I brought this up because this is a question that I've been receiving a lot from people outside of Venezuela. People keep asking me like, why are Venezuelans not like completely panicking, losing their minds by the fact that there's going to be a potential invasion or attack against our country? And it's because we are a people trained in survival. We already know what it is to live through unimaginable conditions. We already know what it's like to live through war-like conditions. So it's not that we are not scared about it. It's that we have learned that the psychological battle is one of the most important ones, and we cannot let the enemy to infiltrate our minds, to make us desperate, to make us think that there is no hope, that we don't have any power, and that the only way out is to somehow destabilize our own country and overthrow our own government. So we know how important it is to stay calm in this psychological operation against our country. Uh, that said, we do have more than 8 million people who have joined the militia, and they are training alongside the military to defend our country in the face of an aggression. So it is a duality. So I wanted to bring this background of U.S. sanctions against Venezuela because, like I said, I think that we cannot make any kind of analysis about Venezuela without always bringing up U.S. sanctions, and we cannot think about a potential invasion or military attack against Venezuela without remembering that we already have been living under these uh, sanctions that, like I said, I think they are an act of genocide on itself. So, with this background, we now arrive at this moment in time when Venezuela is being threatened by the U.S. military. The United States has positioned its military, warships and warplanes all across the Caribbean, and is now bombing small vessels in the Caribbean, and it is killing people without any consequences under the pretext that is fighting drug trafficking. And indeed, it really doesn't take too much of an analysis to realize that this is, of course, have nothing to do with drug trafficking. And this, of course, is just another chapter of the same regime change operation. And the US is simply moving from killing people through sanctions to now killing people with bombs. in less than 2 months, and we need to really put this in perspective, in less than 2 months, the United States have killed 57 people in the Caribbean Sea and the Pacific Ocean. 57 people. Some of them are believed to be fishermen from Venezuela, Colombia, and Trinidad and Tobago. Right now, we have families in Venezuela, Colombia, and Trinidad who are grieving their loved ones. Right now, we have entire communities, entire fishing communities across the Caribbean who are afraid to go fishing, which is it is the main source of income that they have. And they are afraid to go out fishing because they are afraid of being bombed by the U.S. military. And, I just want to, the U.S. military continues to claim that these 57 people, they are all narco-terrorists. And narco-terrorist is a word that, first, it doesn't have any legal ground. And second, it is a dehumanization tactic. The US is calling people narco-terrorists so they can dehumanize them and they can, that way, justify killing them. And I want to really emphasize the dehumanization part because I think it's not talked about enough since this whole bombing campaign began in the Caribbean. I think the way that the US is dehumanizing Venezuelans and Caribbean people in general, calling them narco-terrorists, it is very reminiscent to the way Israel kept saying that hospitals and schools and residential buildings in Gaza were somehow Hamas hiding places. And they did that so they could justify genocide in the Palestinian people. It is really the same script. It is the same script. It is the dehumanization first so we can kill them later. So the U.S. is now dehumanizing anyone they find navigating in Caribbean waters, but they will soon move on to dehumanize the rest of the Venezuelan people so they can actually do the same to everybody here. So I really want to invite people who are here today, who are listening to me, to use every platform, every means necessary to oppose the lies about Venezuela being a nation ruled by narco-terrorists, to oppose the dehumanization of the Venezuelan people. And I'm going to give you a set of, like a little manuals so you can debunk these lies with anybody who asks you. And you can do this by just asking 3 questions. The first one will be, how much cocaine and fentanyl is produced in Venezuela? The answer is 0. Cocaine is mainly produced in Colombia, Bolivia, Peru, and fentanyl is produced in clandestine labs in North America, and it reaches the United States through Mexico. And I just want to make clear that this doesn't mean that the United States will have any right to attack or sanction Mexico, Bolivia, Peru, or Colombia. No, we all know that the whole idea that Latin America produces drugs is simply because the United States consumes them and has managed and it has actually financed and made sure that the drug production continues. The second question will be, how much cocaine transits to Venezuela before heading to the United States? The answer will be less than 10%. And according to some estimates, it could actually be as low as 5%. And the Venezuelan authorities, they size the majority of that. So, and these are numbers that are certified by the United Nations. If you go and read every single report the United Nations has produced in the past 20 years regarding global drug trafficking, you are going to find that Venezuela is not mentioned as a drug-producing country or a drug trafficking country. In fact, when Hugo Chavez expelled the DEA from Venezuela in 2005, the United Nations declared Venezuela a country free of coca leaf cultivation, a status that maintains to this day. Now, the third question would be, can a country that doesn't produce drugs and plays a minimal role in international drug trafficking be run by a drug cartel that masquerades as a government? And I think the question in itself exposes how ridiculous, outrageous, and baseless this accusation is. I think, put it simply, of course now, the Cartel de los Soles doesn't exist. The Cartel de los Soles exists inside the narrative of mainstream media. It exists inside the narrative that the US government has built around Venezuela. It exists with the purpose of dehumanizing Venezuela, of dehumanizing the people of Venezuela, the government of Venezuela, so they can justify sanctioning Venezuela, killing people in the Caribbean, and so and they can also manufacture consent for a possible military intervention in Venezuela. And this will be, I mean, the easiest way to realize that this is all a lie and it is regime change operation is if you simply listen to Donald Trump and all of his close officials, because they are not hiding the truth. They're really saying it out loud. Uh, Donald Trump has said that he has authorized CIA covert lethal operations in Venezuela. He has said that he is planning to execute land strikes against Venezuela. There are reports that the U.S. government is considering bombing cocaine facilities. And you can imagine that cocaine facilities are most likely going to turn out to be like crucial infrastructure inside Venezuela. Uh, Moreover, the U.S. government has never had hidden the fact that they are interested in Venezuelan resources, in the massive oil resources that Venezuela has. And we know that the U.S. imperialist killing genocidal Zionist machine needs oil to function. So, whether this is all a psychological operation, as some people believe, or if they are actually trying to manufacture a Gulf of Tonkin kind of incident to justify an aggression against Venezuela, this is all regime change operation. So I want to invite people to try to, as much as possible, to emphasize this dehumanization narrative against Venezuela. Again, this needs to be the main way that we fight against what the US is doing. We cannot allow them to continue to dehumanize people. So to finish, because I don't want to take too long, I know there are other panelists. I know that the main purpose of this webinar it is to reflect on why it matters to defend Venezuela against US aggression and why it matters to show solidarity. And, I think the answer to that is simple. The first reason would be that it is the right thing to do. No country deserves to be sanctioned. No country deserves to be bombed or military intervene. No country deserves to go through collective punishment just because it doesn't comply with U.S. interests. In Venezuela, like any other country, has a right to self-determination and to sovereignty. The second reason that I think it matters to defend Venezuela in this moment and always, it is because we cannot allow the United States to continue to dehumanize people. They have dehumanized immigrants inside the United States so they can kidnap them, detain them, and send them to concentration camps in third countries. They have dehumanized Palestinians so Israel can commit genocide. And now they're dehumanizing people in Venezuela and the Caribbean so they can kill people on small vessels and calling them narco terrorists. Uh, who is going to be next? Who are the next people that the US is going to dehumanize, and are we going to allow it? And finally, Venezuela's 25-year-long Bolivarian revolution, it is arguably the most important anti-imperialist stronghold in Latin America and the Caribbean. Uh, the US is threatening Venezuela because of two main reasons. The first one is because it wants the oil, but the second one is because it wants to end the example set by Venezuela that a socialist way is possible and that surviving and even defeating US imperialism is also possible. You have to remember that in 2020, people thought that Venezuela was going to collapse. I mean, we were in truly horrifying humanitarian conditions, and people thought that Venezuela was ready to collapse. Even Donald Trump said it. He said that, oh, Venezuela was ready to collapse, and we would have taken all that oil. And we didn't. And not only we didn't collapse, but we actually have found new ways to survive. We have reimagined our economy. We have reimagined our social connections. We have our communes and our social movements have actually been thriving. And this is something that not even for US imperialists, it is something that they thought was possible. So I think they're going to end this example set by Venezuela. And finally, you have to remember that the allies of Donald Trump and the US government in general in Venezuela are people like Maria Corina Machado, who recently got the Nobel Peace Prize. Maria Corina Machado has said that not only has she been promoting a US invasion of Venezuela, like someone who likes peace would do, of course, but she also has been saying that if she reaches power, she is going to make Venezuela an ally of Israel. She is going to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. She's going to move the Venezuelan embassy to Jerusalem. And she's going to open Venezuela's oil resources to American companies so they can exploit it and do whatever they want and not pay for it like they used to do uh, many decades past. So can you imagine? Can you imagine Venezuela with its massive oil resources uh, falling and becoming an ally of US imperialism and Zionism? I think it will have devastating consequences for the entire region, for Palestine, for Cuba, and for every people and movement that is fighting for freedom. Because I think defending Venezuela in many ways, it is defending our collective humanity. It is defending the fact that we want a future that is not shaped by US unilateralism, a future that is multipolar, a future where there's real social justice. So I think that's my conclusion. You know, defending Venezuela is defending our collective humanity.
Thank you so much, Andreina Chavez, for bringing that perspective direct from Venezuela. It's very important, I think, for people to hear a holistic analysis of why Venezuela is so much in the crosshairs of the United States, so we can use that in our work, but also to hear the response of the Venezuelan people. Yes, Venezuela has been under a war without bombs. People are going about their daily lives, but our work is urgent and needed more than ever before. So thank you for joining us here today. Andreina Chavez from Venezuela Analysis. Look up all of her articles. She appears regularly on the podcast, and very important to follow her work. So thank you. Next, we have, as I was mentioning before, a video from our Cuban speaker today due to the multiple challenges with Zoom. Fernando Rojas is the coordinator of the Cuban chapter of the Network of Intellectuals, Artists, and Social Movements in Defense of Humanity. And he is also director of the Casa de las Americas Publishing Fund. And we are honored to have some words from him regarding the importance of Venezuela today. I'm going to try this one more time. Michelle, my option for sharing with sound is not showing up. I don't know if it's anything on your end that we can adjust. That's never happened to me before. And we'll go to our next speaker. Maybe we can keep troubleshooting that if that's okay. Oh, maybe I'm getting a tip.
Yeah, that happened last time.
Did it? Okay.
Yeah,
So we can go
yeah,
to our
go
next
to the
speaker.
next.
That's okay. Maybe I'll forward you the video and we might have to try you sharing it. Okay, apologies everybody. We can go to our next speaker. We have with us today Laura Capote. Laura is joining from the Operational Secretariat of ALBA Movimientos, which is an anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist platform bringing together over 400 organizations across 25 countries. And Laura is based in Colombia. Laura, the floor is yours.
Perfect, Allison. Good evening, everyone. I promise interpreters that I will speak slowly because it's always a bit difficult, but I know it's very important to share what we have been constructing and talking about in ALBA Movimientos. As you said, Allison, I'm part of the operational secretariat. ALBA Movimientos is a regional group that is born in defense of the people of our continent. And it was born after ALCA was fought against. We were able to fight and win against the US imperialism by the hand of Hugo Chavez and Fidel Castro. They created these links, and for us, defending the Bolivarian Revolution and defend the sovereignty in our continent is the reason for existence. We were born to create links, and that is what we're doing now. I was listening to what Andreina was saying, and also what Allison was saying. We really do have the challenge of understanding what's happening in Venezuela. It's happening really in the continent. This dispute that is being carried out in Latin America and the Caribbean. On one side, you can see the United States and its imperialism. We have always been conceived as the backyard. And on the other side, we have the Bolivarian Martian defense movement. It is America that Simón Bolívar dreamt of. We also talk about what Martí said, it's a plan against a plan. This is a war that is open, and we know that we haven't won it yet, but also imperialism hasn't won it. We know that the neocolonial model has not won. What we need to do is contextualize the need for the defense of sovereignty. Our independences were won with a lot of pain, with a lot of popular organization, with farmers, with fishermen, and all of this continent won its sovereignty. That's why the US and Donald Trump are mistaken when they think that we're going to cross our arms and see how they invade our region. There's a Panamanian singer that sang with Rubén Blades. It's a song called Tiburón, shark. That's how we call gringos. They are sharks in our waters. They are looking for our resources, our capacities, our intellectual and artistic capacities. There are places for taking the resources. In that context, for us, it's a demonstration also to those that follow the progressive movements in the world, those that the people that believed Tony Negri can realize now that that isn't the case. Capitalism continues to be looking for a war, and so is imperialism. Imperialism continues to go ahead, and therefore we in our region should continue our movement of socialism, particularly because in our region, as Andreina was saying, the intellectual level of Donald Trump, he's projecting onto others. They think that we are as stupid as he is. We know that that old excuse of the war against drugs is merely a euphemism to guise what is really an invasion. As you know, I'm Colombian, and here we have the clearest example of what a war on drugs, supposed war on drugs, means. It allows the economic opening to assistance from the other countries. Andreina was saying that US imperialism is now doing with bombs what it used to be doing with sanctions, what it's doing with Cuba, for example. in our region, in Colombia, for example, they did it through programs with USAID and NED, what they would call assistance against drugs. We can simply see it with numbers. Plan Colombia meant the strengthening of the war in our country and the financing of illegal groups that developed a suite of violations against human rights under the excuse of a fight against drugs. What they're looking for really is the power over our resources. So when we now hear about this war on drugs, well, that's old news, because in this continent, we've already heard about the fight against communism and terrorism and all the supposed nuclear weapons, everything that has happened in the global south that has been invaded with wars from the United States. Well, these formats are repeated. They're not really original. They don't have creativity to create new excuses. In that context, we think that what we need to do as organizations in Latin America and from the global south is in the defense of sovereignty and the self-determination of our people. So sovereignty is not only to sing the anthem, sovereignty is had in these moments. We need to get together, and that's what we have done. Gustavo Petro did this. It's not just talking about the defense of the people of Colombia. So Donald Trump took his passports, called him a narco trafficker. This is a dynamic of someone that believes that this continent is his. If you don't speak well of me, then you are no longer my friend. It's like you are a child and you behave as one. Obviously, President Donald Trump has a very low intellectual capacity, and he is carrying out an offensive that is very difficult for our continent. In ALBA, we consider that our regional project, we've said that we may possibly need to turn down the volume or radicalism, maybe not talk about imperialism. Well, listen, the enemy knows what it's doing. They're very clear in what they say, and we need to consider being very clear in going through with the proposals of President Maduro and Gustavo Petro. We need to tell, just as Chavez said, that gringos should go home. We need to use that phrase. We said ALCA should go to hell, and we need to carry on with the economic links between our different countries. ALCA carried out institutional coups and several different illegal military interventions in our territories.
For that reason, it's worthwhile to wait and inspire other countries of our region to join that single defense of our territories. And as the CELAC proclamation of 2014, Latin America and the Caribbean is a zone of peace. We have decided we are going to defend our hemisphere against any wars and any outside interference in our territory and in our defense of Latin America as a zone of peace. We need the other countries of the region to also work on that. Defense of Venezuela and Colombia's sovereignty cannot just be up to Nicolas Maduro and Gustavo Petro. We need Mexico to use its strong voice through President Claudia Sheinbaum. We need Brazil to also work with us. We also need the other countries of the region to lose understanding that there are some who at this point in time are completely aligned and are lackeys of the US policy. And we saw this yesterday with the vote in the UN on the resolution to lift the blockade on Cuba. All of the countries that follow Donald Trump either abstained or voted against Cuba. So in this regard, brothers and sisters, we in ALBA want to invite you to think about the project and processes that are not necessarily revolutionary and are not necessarily anti-imperialist. They still should stand with Venezuela and Colombia at this time to defend the sovereignty of our Americas. And I'd like to hear from others. I wonder whether in recent history there has been a time when we had seen this kind of threat, such a clear threat in military terms and in terms of the encroachment on our territory, at least over the last 40 or 50 years, a clear threat advancing in the Caribbean and the Pacific, over 50, 60 people without any evidence or a proof, and they're really sponsoring, at the same time that they're sponsoring a genocide in Palestine. But within this framework, they keep going. We no longer can be surprised anymore by what the United States does. So in this regard, brothers and sisters, I just wanted to place these things before you and have a dialogue based on what Andreina was saying and what Watan and Fernando will also add. I think that it is important, however, to strengthen this convocation of everyone to come together. It shouldn't just be Venezuela and Colombia, who are just the ones who's on the front lines in terms of the attacks on their sovereignty, but we need the entire hemisphere that was freed by our liberators 200 years ago, and we need the peoples of all of the Americas to join hands and defend the sacred land of Latin America and the Caribbean, as Comandante Chavez used to say. And that's what I had to share with you today.
Thank you so much, Laura Capote, for sharing those words today, those words of inspiration and call to action. Yes, that is what we must be doing at this time. And you've given us a further reason. We know that the people of Latin America are fighting back, are mobilizing in the streets, and are capable of resisting US imperialism. But the responsibility of people in the US, in Canada, and other imperialist countries, we must work to get the US out of Latin America, get Canada out of Latin America. It is our responsibility. You can handle what is happening in Colombia and Venezuela and fight back, but we have the responsibility from here to prevent further wars and occupations from the US government and their allies. So thank you. I wanted to go ahead and go back and share the video. We figured out what the issue was, and I will share the video from Fernando Rojas now. Again, he's the coordinator of the Cuban chapter of the Network of Intellectuals, Artists, and Social Movements in Defense of Humanity, and director of the Casa de las Americas Publishing Fund. And we are very excited that we were able to connect and get a video direct from Cuba today.
Buenas tardes a todos y todas.
Good evening, everyone. I'm speaking to you from Havana, Cuba, on behalf of the Cuban chapter of the Network of Intellectuals, Artists, and Social Movements in Defense of Humanity. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak to this webinar from the Venezuela Solidarity Network in the United States and Canada. I've been invited to tell you a little bit about our viewpoint regarding this current point in time of aggression aggression by
contra
the
la
United States
hermana
government
República Bolivariana
against
de
the sister
Venezuela.
republic
Lo
of
primero que quisiera
Venezuela.
situar
The first
es que
thing
no
I'd like
vemos
to do
este
is say
escenario, este proceso
that
como
we
un
see
fenómeno
this,
bilateral
we do not see
que
this
solo
as a
tenga un impacto
bilateral
en las relaciones
phenomenon
entre
that
los
would only
Estados
have an
Unidos
impact on
y
relations
Venezuela.
between the United
El
States and
despliegue
Venezuela.
que realizan hoy el gobierno de los
The
Estados Unidos
deployment
con
done
mucho
today by the
énfasis
government of
y
the
muy
United
jalonado por
States
el Departamento de Estado
is
de ese
really all planned
país
by
es
the
una
State
amenaza para todos
Department
los
of that
pueblos
country,
de la
but it
América
is a
Latina
threat to all of
y
the
el Caribe.
peoples of Latin
Como
America and the
diría
Caribbean.
en agosto de este año una
And in
declaración por la Casa de
August
las
of this
Américas,
year,
se trata de
there
imponer
was
nuevamente
a
la
declaration
política
by
de las
the
banderas en nuestra
Casa of the Americas
militar
saying
de
that they're
barcos,
trying to revive
motores,
gunboat
submarinos,
diplomacy
miles
by
de soldados
deploying
bajo el
submarines,
pretexto de la
thousands
lucha
of
contra
troops
el
and
narcotráfico. Pretexto que no
Navy
solamente ha sido
warships
desmentido y
to threaten our
desmontado
sovereignty.
por las
And it's
propias
all on the
autoridades
pretext
de
that it's been
Venezuela,
completely
sino por
disproven not
varias
only by the
organizaciones y
authorities of Venezuela,
especialistas
but several
internacionales.
organizations and
No
international
se trata de una
specialists.
simple agresión contra
This is
Venezuela. El
not
despliegue
just an
militar en
act
el
of aggression
Caribe
against
por parte de
Venezuela.
los
This
Estados Unidos
military
no es una amenaza
deployment by
contra
the U.S. in the
el
Caribbean
actual gobierno
poses
venezolano.
a threat
Primero
to
retoma
not only
la
the current
práctica
Venezuelan government. It's
que se
nothing new,
remonta
however.
al
It
momento
goes
en que
back
Chávez
to
impulsó un proceso de
a practice
cambio
that
en
started
Venezuela
as soon
y al
as
mismo tiempo
Chavez
es una
started a
amenaza
process
para
of
todos
change. But at the
aquellos
same
que
time, it
tratan
is
de
a
defender
threat
su
to
soberanía
anyone who
y que
tries to
signaron
defend their
esa
sovereignty
defensa y esa
and
proclama de la América Latina y el Caribe
has a
como zona de
program
paz.
whereby
Lo más
Latin America
doloroso
and
es
the
que hay
Caribbean
algunos
are a zone of
gobiernos
peace.
ubicados geográficamente en
Some
nuestra área,
governments
pero
geographically
cuya mente
located in our
va
part of
o
the
viaja
world
al norte,
unfortunately
se radica en el
travel to
norte,
the
que están
United
apoyando
States, and
esta
that's
campaña.
where
En el
their
caso
mindset
particular
is, and that's
de
why they're
Venezuela,
supporting this.
el
In the
gobierno de
specific
Trinidad y
case of
Tobago ha
Venezuela, we
servido
see the
como punta
government
de
of
lanza
Trinidad
a
and Tobago
estas amenazas
is
y estas
serving
potenciales agresiones,
as the
prácticas agresiones que ya se están
lance point with
produciendo.
these aggressions
Nosotros, en
taking
el
place
caso de
against
Cuba,
Venezuela.
tenemos una
In
expresión
the
muy
case of
reciente.
Cuba,
Hace
we have a
algunas horas
recent expression
se
to
votó en la
describe this just
Organización de
a
Naciones
few
Unidas
hours
la
ago.
resolución para
We
poner fin
actually
al
we
bloqueo de
saw
los
this
Estados
happen
Unidos contra
at
Cuba.
the United
En
Nations
esas
vote
votaciones,
to lift the
países
blockade
como
on
Argentina y
Cuba.
Paraguay
On that occasion,
y
countries such as
otros que se
Argentina and
abstuvieron,
Paraguay,
como el caso
and
de
a few
Ecuador y Costa
others who
Rica,
abstained,
siguieron
such
la
as
línea,
Ecuador and
siguieron
Costa
el
Rica,
planteamiento y la
following
política
the
del
line
gobierno
and the
de
policy of
de
the
Donald
government of the United
Entonces
States,
esta sería una
the Trump
primera línea que me
administration.
parece importante defender,
So I
que,
think
no
it's
es, que se trata
important
de no ver el
to
problema como un
understand
problema
this.
bilateral, sino como una amenaza
We
mucho
need to
más amplia.
understand that the
Hemos
current
hablado de
situation
otros
is not a
países, pero
bilateral
también
problem,
constituye una
but
amenaza
rather
al
it's a threat to
interior
the entire
de los
region.
Estados Unidos. Es una
It's
manera
also,
de
they
lavar
say that it's a threat
toda
to
la
the United
política
States.
contra los
And
movimientos de
they have,
migrantes,
this is
contra
part of all of
determinados
their
sectores al
policy
interior de los
against
Estados Unidos, que ha
migrants
llevado a la
and various
militarización
sectors of the
de
U.S.
algunas
population.
ciudades
And
en
this has
ese
led
país.
to the
Asimismo,
occupation of some
es
U.S.
expresión
cities.
de los
By the same
coletazos que
token,
está dando el gobierno de
it
los
is
Estados Unidos para
also
tratar
an
de
expression
recomponer su papel
of
hegemónico
the
a escala internacional. Son coletazos muy peligrosos.
The
Y aunque
thrashing
hay
of the
acusaciones,
dying
declaraciones
empire,
y
and this
declaraciones que
thrashing
pueden
is
parecer
very
ridículas, no hay
dangerous.
que disminuir
And
esa
we should,
peligrosidad. Por
even
eso
though
no
sometimes
puede
what they say sounds
dejarse en la
ridiculous, we
movilización, no
cannot
puede dejarse en un
discount
llamado de
them. We
atención
cannot let down
sobre
our
lo
guard in
peligroso
our
del
mobilization and our
momento
understanding
actual.
how
Se busca
dangerous this
cualquier
current moment
pretexto
is.
para
They are
agredir
seeking
a
any
Venezuela para
pretext
generar un incidente que pueda
to
servir de
attack
pretexto,
Venezuela,
y
to
conocemos
create
de
an
sobra
incident
cuáles
that
han
will
sido, cómo
serve
se han
as a
utilizado esas
pretext.
prácticas a lo largo
And
de
we
la
know
historia,
very well what
sobre
their
todo en lo que los
practices have
Estados
been
Unidos ha
throughout history,
considerado su patio
particularly
trasero,
when
que
the
es la América
United
Latina
States
y el Caribe.
considers to be its
Recientemente
backyard,
han
Latin America
recibido
and
el
the
apoyo
Caribbean.
también de
Recently,
otras organizaciones
they've also received the
internacionales,
support of other international organizations,
aparentemente
supposedly,
referenciales, sólidas, de prestigio,
they are
como aquella que otorga el premio
prestigious
Nobel,
sources of
que se le
information,
entregó
such
a
as the
María Corina
Nobel Peace
Machado,
Prize,
que está
being
bien
conferred on
identificada
Maria
como
Corina
promotora de
Machado,
la
who
violencia
has
en
been
Venezuela y por llamar a la
clearly
agresión
shown
contra
herself to be
su propio
a
país.
promoter of violence and
una
aggression against our own
senadora
country.
anticubana,
An
radicada de origen
anti-Cuban
cubano, radicada en los Estados
senator of
Unidos,
Cuban
tuvo el
heritage in
desatino
the
de
United States
compararla con Bolívar, diciendo que era una Bolívar de estos,
was as
la Casa de las
ridiculous as to
Américas publicó en
compare
enero de
Maria
este año
Corina
una
to
selección de
Bolivar.
textos de Simón Bolívar,
And
y quien lo recorre se
I
puede
know
dar
that here in
cuenta
the Casa de las
de
Américas we
cara al
selected a
Congreso
text
Anfictiónico de Panamá
of
en
Bolivar,
1836,
and
que lo
this was also
celebraremos
part
el
of
año
the
próximo, 200 años,
1986
lo alejado que estaba
the
Simón Bolívar y las ideas de Simón
we're
Bolívar
about to have the
de
200th
defender
anniversary
una
of
subordinación de
this
nuestro
text by
continente, de
Simón
nuestra
Bolívar
América,
in defense
como
of
diría
our
Hugo Martín, a el
hemisphere, our
gigante de las
continent,
7
as
Entonces se
Martin
trata
to
de estar
defend
atentos,
against
se
what
trata de no
Martin
disminuir en
called
la
the
movilización,
seven
se trata de
league
no
giant, or the
disminuir
giant in seven
las
league boots.
amenazas y el
And
riesgo
so we face
real que
these
existe,
threats and the true
y
risk
al
that
mismo
exists right
tiempo
now, but
estar
at the
al
same
tanto de la
time,
manera ejemplar en que ha ido
we
respondiendo
need
Venezuela a estas
to
amenazas.
also
No
recognize the
solamente ha sido
exemplary
a
way
través
that Venezuela has
de
responded
discursos
to
y
all of these threats.
posicionamientos
It is not
oficiales por
only
parte del
between the
gobierno, sino de una
official government
movilización
statements, but
popular que ha
also the
incluido a los
mobilization of
sectores
the
más amplios
people, which
de la
includes
población venezolana.
the
Desde
broad
Cuba,
sectors of the Venezuelan
expresamos nuestra
population.
solidaridad y
In
nuestro apoyo a
Cuba,
mi
we
hermano
want to express our
pueblo
solidarity and
venezolano,
support for
y al mismo tiempo llamamos a
our
la
brothers and
comunidad
sisters in
internacional, a los
Venezuela, and
pueblos
we
del
also
mundo,
want call
a
upon the peoples of the
mantenerse atentos
world
al actual
to pay
despliegue
attention to
que
this
se
current
realiza en nuestro
deployment
continente.
that is being conducted in our hemisphere.
Strong words of solidarity from Fernando Rojas. Thank you, Fernando. When you see this video, we know it is difficult to participate tonight, but we appreciate your contribution and the solidarity of the people of Cuba for Venezuela and for all just causes around the world. And very important, as U.S. warships, over 10,000 troops, fighter jets in Puerto Rico, this war drive is directed not only against Venezuela, but also against all peoples of Latin America and the Caribbean, and especially Cuba, to try and force and break the ties of solidarity between Cuba and Venezuela through their threats of war. We have a final speaker in our panel, so if there are any questions, I'll just give a short reminder to put them in the chat in the Q&A box, actually, if that is possible. We'll have a time for discussion, then some greetings from people that are on the call, and call to action. So thank you again for joining. Our final speaker on the panel tonight is Dr. Watan Jamil Alaved. Watan is a Palestinian physician trained in Cuba at the Latin American School of Medicine, who I had the pleasure of speaking with just yesterday at an action in support of Cuba, a 24-hour virtual picket for Cuba. And Watan, it is very good to see you again today to talk about Venezuela. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. It's a pleasure to be with you again. Thank you all for your participation, for your invitation. I prefer to speak in Spanish. It's my good.
Thank you, everyone, for the invitation, and thank you for thinking of me. Up until a couple of years ago, people would ask me, why would a Palestinian speak on this kind of panel, talking about Cuba, Venezuela, Colombia, Nicaragua, a Latin American context? And I think the answer came about 15 or 16 years ago when I began to work in a political organization. A comrade told me, in order to understand any international context, you need to understand the elements of it and see how close they are or not to the Palestinian cause. And it was through the analysis of the Palestinian cause, which is now a central issue for humanity, as it always was. And as we identify it, the case of the oppressed against the oppressors. And this led me to realize that Palestinian identity goes much beyond that. Any human being on this planet who fights for their sovereignty, self-determination, has to be Palestinian because their identity is one of struggle. And today, as Alison said, I am a Palestinian Cuban, or almost a Cuban, and I have been trained in the Cuban Revolution, and I was able to live the experience of being an internationalist and to understand that phrase that a comrade shared with me 15 years ago. And I would like to now talk about, pick up where Laura left off. Laura mentioned a song, and I'd like to mention Ali Primera. I don't think you can achieve anything without a revolution. And in fact, Venezuela under the eternal Comandante Hugo Chavez incarnated the thinking of Bolivar. And put it into practice. And we're seeing this with the Bolivarian Revolution that was able to resist the attacks from the hegemon in the north. And that revolution continues, even though the United States perpetrates a silent genocide against our hemisphere and the global south. Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, this militarization and the laboratories that they created more than 100 years ago in Palestine, but they continue to test it, the weapons of the West, which now they want to put into action in this hemisphere. I don't think there is anything new, as Fernando said. This is nothing new in imperialism's bag of tricks, particularly the Yankees, to always create false pretexts to interfere in the internal affairs of any country in the global south. This is what happened with Iraq in 2003 when they created a false pretext with weapons of mass destruction. And that's what happened with Iraq. They did it, the same thing with Libya, and they also did this with Iran. And they have not been able to overturn that revolution. And now they continue trying this with Venezuela. And I think the last interview of President Nicolas Maduro, he placed data on the table that was not created by his government, but rather by international experts who have been conducting research on the situation of drug trafficking in the Caribbean and have stated that Venezuela does not produce any heroin or methamphetamine. So going back to Chavez, I believe that Chavez was part of the reason why the United States felt it had to intervene in Venezuela, because really Chavez sent them to hell, as Laura was reminding us. And he was a giant who was very honest. And we recall his speech in 2011 at the United Nations, which really was a letter for Palestine. And he said, he shared a paragraph that said the current model of the United Nations does not work because it only follows the orders of the United States.
Of course, and someone that tells the truth and seeks the good for his people, a man who brings to the table once again the Bolivarian thought of a socialist project, of a homeland that is human. He carries out the teachings of Simón Bolívar. It's a project for the future, a prosperous homeland. I believe this was painful for imperialism, the victory of the Cuban Revolution felt like a bone in the throat of imperialism. It's a country that never believed itself to be the backyard of the United States. Anderina and Laura also mentioned this. What is it that we have to do? What's the plan today? Well, the United States, as well as the Zionist entity, doesn't know any language other than force and power. There's a Zionist that wrote the Iron Wall thesis. He says that in his thesis, he says that Moors, quote unquote, non-whites don't understand any other language than force. And our right, it shouldn't be asked for, it should be taken by sword. We need to recreate the speech in the ways that people in ALBA Movimientos are doing. We need to bring consciousness to our youth, those that are militant on our side, and even those that aren't, and give them, we need to give them these ideas about revolution, this fight that is, we can win this fight, the one that is coming. This, I was talking about this with Allison yesterday. The West is promoting bases, and they say that Cuba is harboring terrorists, and we declare that these countries, Cuba, Venezuela, are actually sponsors of freedom. Venezuela and Cuba were the first to send away the Israeli ambassadors because they understood that the Palestinian cause is an internationalist cause and it's a just cause. And for these past 2 years, the political speeches, the most advanced speeches were coming from these countries. Díaz-Canel was the first president, along with his people. He spoke for Palestine. President Nicolás Maduro did the same, not only in manifestation, in these protests, but also by sponsoring an international conference on Palestine. We hadn't heard from way back from Fidel Castro a speech that was so radical and so good as the one that we heard from Petro, and also in his challenge of the US country, government. And for the people that are protesting for Palestine. This is something that is happening around the world more and more, but we need to educate our friends about our narrative. It should prevail, and we need to have more creativity in ways of resisting this monster, this imperialist monster. We should never trust imperialism, as Che used to say. And I will finish with Ali Primera's words. Let us be joyful for the people that are not resigning themselves.
Thank you very much, Dr. Watan, for being with us here tonight, for sharing about your experience and analysis. Cuba and Palestine have both created, doctors of, I said this yesterday too, but conscience and science. And that is clear that you embody all of that so well, and we are really honored to have you within our movement. And thank you for bringing the words of Ali Primera. I feel like we could have started with that song. We'll include it in our next webinar. I think he's one of the many musicians that we can learn from to help embolden our struggle here. So thank you very much. We have a few questions that are here in the chat. We're going to have some time for Q&A, and then as I mentioned, there will be short greetings coming from a number of people online that are representing different organizations, mostly based in Canada or the United States, that we wanted to hear from today as we build our united solidarity with Venezuela at this important time. The question, Laura is still here. Oh, excellent. Thank you, Laura. I think we could start with that one, and then Andreina, there's another question as well that I think is directed at you, if your internet is still working well. But a lot of people in the chat are curious about Colombia, of course. So Laura, could you share some reflections about Colombia today and Colombia-Venezuela relations?
Of course, Allison, I'm very happy to hear so much curiosity about Colombia, and someone who mentioned how we should understand that military that was always with allies or allied itself to the US. What does that military force now look like with Petro? I would say that there are two elements to understand this. One is that the process of Gustavo Petro's government is new. It only has 3 years and a little bit more. All of us know that a military doctrine cannot be changed in 3 years. This is a historical military force. Given our conflict and our history, this is a military force that has a very strong anti-insurgency angle. Many people from our military who were formed in the Escuelas for the Americas, the School for the Americas, and it exported torturers for all the continent. And also, it's been a military force that has been linked with the importing of weapons from the United States and Israel. Here in Colombia, the protests that we do for Palestine, we say that the bullets that kill Palestinians are the same that the ones that kill Colombians, because it's the same military complex that is so resourcing these military forces. So if the president, as the head of the armed forces, can give some orientation to that, we can see that there is a bit of a change in terms of the speech, the political speeches, particularly in the beginning of the government, where the president said that the armed force had to become, using metaphors, it had to become the army of Bolivar. I would say that that isn't just happened just yet. I would wish that we get an education in that sense, but I think we need many more years for that to actually be come to fruition. But that national sentiment they were talking about in the chat, President Petro has straightened this national sentiment and also a regional one. Sadly, we didn't always have a Latin American angle or a view. With Uribe, the head was turned to the United States. With the politics of Gustavo Petro, we are looking at our neighborhood, we're looking at our region. I don't know if you know, but Colombia is currently in the CELAC presidency, and next weekend on the 8th and 9th in Colombia, there will be a meeting of the presidents of the CELAC. We will surely be talking about what we're talking about here in that meeting. What's important in that sense? And this links up with what happened last weekend. As I said, the government is now turning 3 years old. Recently, we went to elections for the Pacto Histórico. There was a historical outcome. This wasn't a mandatory election. In very broad terms, we could say that it's a project that continues to have a big popular support. Those elections happened in the context of what's going on, and these were on the 26th, the last Sunday. What does that tell us? I don't know if the people of Colombia would want to invade Venezuela. I don't think so, because we lived through 70 years of war. If there's a people that know what war is, displacement is, the concentration of land, paramilitary powers, violence, and the violation of human rights, that is the Colombian people. So these people have decided to go for peace. So I would very much doubt Colombia participating in any invasion on Venezuela. Venezuela and Colombia are really separated by a fictitious border. We are two peoples that are very similar. We eat the same thing. We drink coffee. We drink rum. We dance salsa. We dance joropo. We share a universe, a cultural, historical universe. The colors of our flags are very similar. Our families, I have family members that are Venezuelans. I don't know that there's any Colombian family that doesn't have Venezuelan members, and vice versa. And as Gustavo Cabello was saying, there are no bombs that just kill Chavistas. An invasion is an invasion for everyone, for those that defend the government and for those that don't. And the people know this. On the other hand, people know, as I said before, the president said 3 days ago, you should not consider the Colombian army to carry out an invasion on Venezuela. So there is no political decision on the side of Petro to lend our army for an invasion on Venezuela. I'm sure that in the CELAC meeting, this will come up. We need to construct a continental military force. It's the NATO version, and it's an organization that we know carries out wars. He says we need to turn that around and consider a defense system for our continent. And in a situation like this, it becomes necessary and obvious. I'm sure this will come as a proposal in the CELAC. I wish I could be able to come out there and say that the army should not be used, the Colombian army should not be used to invade. But I do trust that Gustavo Petro and his government has been clear enough and has been very dignified. I think history will remember his dignified position in this difficult situation. He did not kneel down to the US imperialism. He didn't kneel in front of someone who treats people so poorly. Us having a Nicolas Maduro or a Gustavo Petro is a very strong advantage that we should take, we should consider. It is there that the defense of our continental sovereignty is.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive response. I think a lot of people have been following carefully the Colombian government response to Trump's attacks, and it's very important that we also consider the people of Colombia, and I think that's been very helpful in your response. Thank you so much. Does either Adriana or Watan, do you want to speak to this question at all?
Yes. I'm going to repeat what Laura said, what Diosdado Cabello said. There are no bombs that just kill Chavistas, and I think we need to consider what happened in Iran. When Israel attacked it, we saw a wave of reconsidering, I don't know if I should call it nationalism or the what the meaning of the Persian homeland meant. Revolutionaries, counter-revolutionaries. Everyone was together against the attack from Israel.
If Yankee imperialism makes the mistake of attacking Venezuela, even if it's a slight attack, like any piece of Venezuelan land, if God allows it, I think that will greatly strengthen the internal front within Venezuela. That's my opinion. That's my analysis. I've been to Venezuela. I know lots of Venezuelans, and their feeling of belonging to their land goes far beyond political differences. And they know that defending their homeland is the supreme objective. And this is also along Bolivarian thinking. That's what I had to say.
Thank you, Watan. Adriana, so you're here now. If you have a response to this question, and then there's another question addressed to you in the chat, kind of two actually, regarding whether there'll be a possible civil war in Venezuela should the U.S. strike, if you think this is a possibility. And then the part two of the second question, has support for Maduro increased after the U.S. threats on Venezuela, and have the U.S. threats on Venezuela caused any further divisions within Venezuela's right-wing opposition?
Yes, so to answer the first question about a possible civil war in Venezuela, that is completely unlikely. The Venezuelan people is not really a people that is used to violence or propense to be inclined into a type of war, a civil war like that. But most importantly, we already demonstrated that we wouldn't. In 2019, when the United States government imposed Juan Guaido as a self-proclaimed president, and they backed with everything they had this parallel government led by Juan Guaido, the main purpose of that idea was that they thought that the military and the people would side with Guaido, and there would be a civil war, and what the Guaido faction will win the civil war, and Maduro will be overthrown, and Guaido will become president. That was the real purpose, and maybe not many people are aware of that, because of course this wasn't something that it was being said openly But that was one of the main strategies that they were looking with the idea of imposing a figure like Guaido as a supposed president. They wanted this Guaido to sort of be the one person that the half of the military or more were going to somehow support and help him overthrow the government. So we already demonstrated that even when they try, they cannot make the Venezuelan people go into a civil war. Um, Not only that, but we also have several examples in the past in which the opposition, the Venezuelan opposition, has tried to create an environment of violence inside Venezuela, and they have tried to impose these guarimbas, which is basically is street violence, like barricadas in the streets. Uh, and the ultimate aim of those violent protests was also to try to promote a civil war in Venezuela. And the Venezuelan people responded in a way that it was completely amazing. People united, people rejected the violence, even the people who were against the government, they were saying, this is not the way. We do not support killing each other, uh, holding your neighbors hostage, because that's what they were doing. They were holding people hostage inside their neighborhoods, their houses. And Venezuela has again and again and again responded in a way that is always for peace, that is always for solving issues in a political way, solving issues with dialogue. So no, the idea that a civil war could happen in Venezuela is completely unrealistic. Um, I was actually listening right now to what Laura and what Tom were saying, and I also want to agree that President Gustavo Petro has shown incredible dignity and solidarity with Venezuela. And he has done so despite the fact that he doesn't actually see eye to eye with President Maduro. They're not exactly completely ideologically intertwined. I mean, they have their differences, and President Petro has said that before. And he has demonstrated that it is possible to not completely agree with another government, not to support another government, and still not become an ally of US imperialism, and still reject the possibility of an invasion or military attack against that country, because at the end of the day, anything that happens to Venezuela is going to have repercussions to the Colombian people. We are one nation, even though we have this imaginary line that is the border. At the end of the day, Venezuelans and Colombians are the same people. The 60-year war that Colombia has experienced, that has lived through, it has also been a war that we as Venezuelans have felt in many ways. I come from a city that is on the border with Colombia. So I've grew up my entire life living with people who were running away from the Colombian conflict. I know exactly what it means to what this war did to Colombia, and Venezuelans are quite aware that we really are one people and that we need each other. Colombia needed Venezuela during this 60-year war, and Venezuela needs Colombia now that the United States is threatening us. So yes, so to say plainly, I do think that even though Colombia and the Colombian military might still need several more years of becoming an actual force that is Bolivarian and that is with the people and not against the people. I think that President Petro has shown that he's going to be unmovable in the idea that he's not going to allow that the Colombian military joins any kind of genocidal war against Venezuela. And regarding the other question, is actually, I really like this question because it's actually funny. When Maria Corina was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, one of the reasons they awarded her the prize was because they said she united the Venezuelan opposition. And that couldn't be less true. It is the complete opposite. Maria Corina did not unite the Venezuelan opposition. The majority of the Venezuelan opposition in Venezuela is against Maria Corina Machado. They do not support her call for an invasion in Venezuela. They do not support the idea that she wants to crown herself the president of Venezuela. the majority of the opposition in Venezuela has actually become much more democratic in the past few years. They have presented themselves to election. They have posted candidates to election. They now hold governors. They are deputies, and they know that the only way to actually have any kind of political power inside the country is to present themselves in democratic ways, to go to elections and to go to dialogue and to respect Venezuelan institutions and to defend Venezuela from U.S. interventionism. So no, the majority of the Venezuelan opposition is actually completely against the idea that Maria Corina Machado is the leader of the Venezuelan opposition, and they reject that she is more or less supporting the U.S. intention of invading Venezuela. So yeah, I think I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, thank you, Adriana. Very well. Laura, I think you have something to add. Go ahead.
Thank you, Allison. I just wanted to respond to that question that I think Max asked in the chat. I think that was very interesting to think, or what could someone do who, if you're against this offensive by the United States against Venezuela and Colombia, but who is not ideologically aligned with Colombia or Venezuela. There's a very important element here that was taken up in the proclamation of Latin America as a zone of peace, and that is the idea of defending sovereignty beyond one's political trend, and that is that's the politically correct answer. Now I can tell you what I really think. First of all, there is not necessarily equality in the ideological positions of Gustavo Petro and Nicolas Maduro. I wish there were. In ALBA Movimientos, we would love to see a more Bolivarian approach from Petro. Maybe that can be strengthened. But what I do believe is you can see as the U.S. is threatening Colombia and Venezuela, the ideological positions of Colombia and Venezuela aren't so far apart. And so they're both proposing defense and a sovereign anti-imperialist country. Sometimes people see that the ideological plane is non-realistic and not material, and the political action is what's more connected to reality. But what we are seeing is that if there were no good analysis by both Colombia and Venezuela and of the projects in their governments, that they must build and strengthen sovereignty and independence in our hemisphere in the face of Monroe Doctrine 2.0 from the US government. If they didn't have that correct analysis, then what's happening now would not happen. And it is happening. This means that the political proposals that have that political root in both of their projects do have a good analysis. In other words, this reflects the facts on the ground. So it invites us, and it shows, as I said, that imperialism is still there, the class struggle is still there, and the defense of sovereignty in our hemisphere in the face of an attack from an outsider is not just something of the past. It's not from the 19th century, and it's not just a matter of ideology, it's rather reality. And so I think that those three elements suffice to ask the people who would not ideologically defend Colombia or Venezuela, but if they look at that reality, well, then what would prevent them from doing this? So that's my final words of provocation to you, Allison and comrades.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was actually perfect timing. I was going to ask that question kind of as our wrap-up question for our panel. We do have to go to the greetings section. I know some folks can't stay much beyond the 1.5 hour mark on a webinar, but I do want to open the floor for greetings. We'll be able to share those far and wide as short messages of solidarity with Venezuela after today's webinar as well. But Andreina and Dr. Watan, perhaps I will have you go first. Andreina, if you have any closing remarks or anything else you'd like to say regarding the last question of building a movement, a broad movement of solidarity, or anything else you'd like to say today.
Yes, so I agree with everything that Laura said and everything that everybody else has said, that we definitely, I think Latin America has already shown for the past 20 years to be a region that really knows about integration and solidarity, and and that it needs to look inside and stop looking to the north, to the United States. Um, so we have learned a lot about that in the past 20 years. I think we already have a really good, a solid ground when it comes to Latin America joining as a whole movement to defend our sovereignty, to defend our resources, to defend our right to self-determination against U.S. colonial pretensions. I think that social movements across the region are still quite powerful. They are demonstrating amazing solidarity with Venezuela and with Colombia and with President Petro and President Maduro. And what I would say is that perhaps what we need to do is to reinvent some of these integration mechanisms that we created many years ago, such as CARICOM and many others. So we need to sort of protect, to make a bulletproof protection of Latin America and the Caribbean, as a zone of peace and integration, despite any kind of different ideologies. And I believe that there was a point when the Venezuelan government was trying to promote it. They were trying to promote the idea of making some kind of a statute that would say it really doesn't matter if we have different ideologies, if we don't see eye to eye, if we don't agree with each other. We need to have like a basic program of things that we agree that involve protecting our countries, protecting sovereignty, not letting foreign powers intervene, creating a strong solidarity movement between us. And I think that's something that we need to restart in many ways. We need to restart the idea that this integration mechanism cannot function on ideologies only. They have to function on the fact that we are a people that has been colonized and intervened by decades by the United States. And if we want to actually progress and have a future where there is social justice, we need to start looking after each other. So yeah, I think that's there. I was reading some comments right now, and I was very interested that people were bringing out the fact that the only actual moment in which Venezuela became a drug trafficking country was during the 1980s and 1990s, when the CIA was working inside Venezuela and they had access inside the Venezuelan military. The guy's name was actually Ramon Guillen. He was a Venezuelan general, and he was an asset of the CIA, and he helped ship thousands, tons of cocaine from Colombia to Venezuela to the United States. And the CIA knew about this. When the scandal sort of exploded in the early 1990s, and the CIA was questioned about it, the answer that they gave was, "Oh, we investigated ourselves, and we found that we didn't do anything wrong." Sort of like when Israel investigates its own war crimes, and it turns out that they think they're innocent. So, and that's the only instant in which Venezuela was actually a country that was a major drug trafficking transit to the United States. And that was stopped because Hugo Chavez came to power. And the first thing that he did was kicked out the CIA agents from Venezuela. He kicked out the DEA agents from Venezuela. And that's why Venezuela was no longer a country that they could use for drug transiting. And I am completely convinced that, every accusation is a confession. I am completely convinced that the United States is actually trying to revert time and to go back to the era in which Venezuela was both a country they could exploit for oil and also a country they could use for drug trafficking. Um, so yeah, I want to thank people who were bringing that up because it brought back the memory about the CIA and what they did in Venezuela.
Thank you again, Andrina, for your time and analysis today. Dr. Watan, is there anything else you'd like to add to close off the panel?
What I would like to say to wrap up is that our narrative is what prevails today. That is to say, the narrative of the global South. That is what is prevailing today after 2 years of the accelerated genocide against Gaza and the people of Palestine. Our social movements and political organizations can also talk about the other just causes in the world. And we need to create an alternative. We must radicalize our discourse and clarify concepts that our youth were not thinking of before. I don't think that we shouldn't think of political events as a train passing by, and when it's gone by, then we move on to something else. I think that today, what we need to do is analyze the current context and apply our history to project into the future and create a collective memory. We, as the peoples of the South, if we cannot and etch those memories in our collective memory, then we're never going to make progress. We have to once again create this in ourselves. We need to get to know ourselves. We need to become more familiar with our own strengths and weaknesses. There's an Arab refrain that says, he or she who knows him or herself and the enemy will be able to win more than 100 battles. I think that our task today, or rather one of our tasks today, is to get to know ourselves before we go confront our enemy. We need to know ourselves. We need to be transparent with ourselves. We need to put our finger right in the wound, because there are some things that hurt in our movements and even our leftist parties. We have to be transparent in our analysis in order to understand where we are headed. And we should also stress our youth. I think that the Generation Z today is learning this. I'm not very far from that generation, Gen Z, but those who were born after the year 2000 have the capacity to generate incredible forms of resistance, and we need to take advantage of this in order to have political education for them and to form this collective memory. And as we said in the conference on Cuba, today we are the generation who are followers of Fidel, and this is part of our main task. And 100 years ago, the Martí marked his generation, and now we who are the followers of Fidel's generation will change the world.
Very strong message. Thank you, Watan. It's true. Our time here today learning about U.S. escalating attacks in Venezuela. Very important that we continue to take that into action. We are following in the footsteps of people before us that changed the world, and we have to believe that change is possible. So thank you for bringing that message to us. Someone just wrote in the chat, very motivational webinar, and I agree, motivational towards action and united action, which is where we're going now. So thank you again to the wonderful panel, Andreina, Dr. Watan, Laura, and Fernando's video. Though he couldn't be here with us today, I'll be sure to send him a big thank you. We're now going to go to a section of the program for greetings from some of the organizations that were able to join here today. I see Karina Mullen has her video on, so I will take that as a sign that you are ready. And if you'd like to give a greeting from the U.S. Peace Council, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. And yes, just want to say that it was incredibly motivational. I'm so inspired and I learned so much and full solidarity with everyone here and with the people of Venezuela. My name is Karina. I'm speaking as a member of the Secretariat of the U.S. Peace Council. On October 12th, our organization issued a statement titled Solidarity Statement U.S. Out of Venezuela and Iran. And I also want to say that it was an honor for me to visit the Bolivarian Republic twice in recent years. I was there once on a fact-finding mission with the International People's Tribunal on U.S. imperialism, sanctions, blockades, and economic coercive measures, and then in 2024 as an election observer. So I was privileged and honored to experience everything that we saw on display here today, the brilliance, the creativity, the resilience, the resistance of the Venezuelan people. The U.S. Peace Council stands in unwavering solidarity with the sovereign nation of Venezuela, and we condemn in the strongest terms U.S. imperialists' escalating drive towards war, and already, as we've heard, war through sanctions and the increasing assault on Venezuela. And we're here today to look at how we can build together with all the great forces, that solidarity and anti-imperialist forces who are on this call. And we see the same brutal system at work abroad as we see here at home. The imperialism that sanctions, threatens regime change, targets innocent people on boats, threatens regime change and assassination, and orchestrates economic warfare against Venezuela is the very same system that militarizes our police, wages war on the working class, especially Black and brown communities here, and cages immigrants here in the belly of the beast, not to mention, as has been mentioned several times, funds and arms the Zionist genocide against the Palestinian people. These are not separate wars. We understand them as interconnected fronts of a single liberation struggle. And we know Venezuela is not targeted for aggression, but for reclaiming its oil, building unity, and natural resources, building unity in the global South, and asserting its sovereignty. So while the U.S. threatens war, the people of Latin America are building peace, and we welcome the statement by Colombian President Gustavo Petro that any military operation that does not have the approval of our sister countries is an act of aggression against Latin America, as it underscores the rising regional resistance to U.S. imperialist intervention. The U.S. response to this has been, of course, more threats against Petro and the region more generally. We know this is a war to preserve. Oh, sorry. We know this is a war. Oh, excuse me. I just lost my train of thought. We know this is a war to preserve a defunct capitalist system in crisis, a system unable to rule without repression and unable to extract without genocidal violence. Therefore, we insist we must stand together. We must continue to organize, and we must stop this destructive madness. U.S. out of Venezuela, end the forever wars abroad and at home. Thank you, comrades.
Thank you very much, Karina, for those greetings. Next, we have Aza Rojbi here from Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice in Canada. And then James Jordan from the Alliance for Global Justice. I'm going to call on you next. Aza, go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Good night. My name is Aza Rojbi. I'm joining everybody to bring greetings on behalf of Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice.
Aza, we lost your camera. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, can you see me now?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you to the Venezuela Solidarity Network and all the panelists and all the people that are coming in today to join this important webinar, to be part of this important discussion. I think we are seeing, all of us, and we've been talking about the increase of hostility of the United States government and of imperialism against Venezuela. We know that Venezuela for decades have been fighting for their self-determination, have been fighting for their sovereignty. So a lot of us that are supporters of Venezuela around the world, this is a very critical and important moment for us to be able to be in webinars and meetings like this, so we can talk about what's happening, and we can talk about how we can further work together to educate and mobilize in the face of this increased hostilities and attack by the United States government and imperialism against Venezuela. So again, thank you for all the participants, for all the speakers at today's event, for the Venezuela Solidarity Network to keep bringing us on a monthly basis. So we're all updated about what's happening in Venezuela, but also hopefully out of all of these, we can come up and talk about how we can work together concretely on International Days of Action, how we can together voice our support and stand up with the people of Venezuela. Que viva Venezuela! Hands off Venezuela!
Thank you, Ezra. Yes, hands off Venezuela. James, are you able to speak now from the Alliance for Global Justice?
Sure. Be happy to.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Well, I want to say that in the interest of a holiday greetings, I have a special relationship with Colombia. There's a little girl, a child of a human rights lawyer there. I normally have a much more fuller beard and a belly, and she was convinced I was Santa Claus, Papa Noel, and used to call me on Christmas Eve to talk to me. And once I went to in La Guajira by the border with Venezuela. I've been there various times, and one time I went there and had a delightful time in this one Wayu indigenous village by the border, where people came up to me and wanted to have their pictures with me because they thought I looked like Papa Noel with the belly and the big beard. And I'm just reminded that in terms of talking about holiday greetings, because this threat, I'm thinking about the Wayu people who are suffering so much, and the people of La Guajira who are suffering so much because of thirst, lack of health care, because of the contamination by mining companies, U.S. policies, the big oil or the big palm oil plantations. And I just want to call out to them, because what's this threat to Venezuela, this threat to Colombia, is also a genocide against these people, and we should remember that. So it's also a war of genocide. So I just want to say real quickly that we are resisting a war for racism, for genocide, and for fascism that is happening all over this hemisphere. It's happening in Portland, Oregon. It's happening in Rio Hacha, Colombia. It's happening. The threat is to Caracas. The threat is, all over. So we need to organize, and I want to invite everybody. We're having a meeting tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Time and 1 p.m. Pacific Time to talk about organizing a day of actions in solidarity with Venezuela and against this war from November 15th through the 23rd. I'm going to put the link here in the chat. And you can contact me for more information if you'd like. My email is james@afgj.org. And here's to democracy, liberation, and the defeat of fascism from all over this hemisphere and around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, James, and thanks for putting the link in the chat. This action that James is going to post is fully supported by the Venezuela Solidarity Network and many organizations online today, and encourage people to stay tuned for a call for united action in solidarity with Venezuela, both in the United States, and my push is always that these actions must be international as someone living here in Canada, so we will make it happen. Next, I want to invite up Barbara Larcombe. Barbara is here representing the Nicaragua Solidarity Coalition.
Hello. Yes, the Nicaragua Solidarity Coalition is an international coalition of organizations and individuals in solidarity with Nicaragua, supporting its sovereignty and affirming its achievements. But needless to say, as a result of that, or consonant with that, our coalition also firmly stands with the people and government of Venezuela in the midst of this new and dangerous round of aggression by the United States. The murderous impunity of the United States must end. We demand respect for international law and the sovereignty of nations. The people of Venezuela have the right to live in peace with the government that they have chosen. We urge all the countries of CELAC to unite against this aggression, which is a threat to us all, and to realize the dream of Bolivar and Sandino for our Americas, united to defend all of our peoples against the forces of imperialism. Que viva la revolución bolivariana, no pasarán.
Thank you, Barbara. Que viva. Next, we have Roger Harris, who is joining from Task Force of the Americas. And then afterwards, I'll call it on you, Mary Carmen. Roger, go ahead.
Thank you, Allison, and just a terrific webinar. It's inspiring to hear about the resistance and the unity of the people in solidarity with the resistance. I'm with the Task Force on the Americas. We were founded 40 years ago, and we're a human rights group. And as a human rights group, we learned from the people that we were in solidarity with, the social movements of Latin America and the Caribbean. And what we learned was to be a consistent human rights advocate, you had to be an anti-imperialist. There was no other way. We take to heart the words of Fidel Castro. I'll read them. He says, if there ever was in history, if there ever was in the history of humanity an enemy who was truly universal, that real and really universal enemy is precisely Yankee imperialism. Down with Yankee imperialism, no war in Venezuela, solidarity.
Thank you, Roger. Yes, solidarity. Next, I have Mary Carmen Guevara, who is joining us from Ottawa, Canada, and ALBA Movimientos there. Mary Carmen, good to see you.
Hey, good to see you too. It's wonderful meeting. I congratulate you first for this effort you're making every month. To everybody, especially the speakers, they were wonderful. I was thinking when the doctor, I don't recall his name, but he said something about the train. I remember I grew up with something my mother always say, and I'm going to say in Spanish, because it was a beautiful thing I learned from a childhood, you know.
Stop the train. I can't stop. Where is that train going to? It's going through going around the world, going from.
You know, I do so much solidarity work around the world. We are not going to stop. United States is not making us to stop. They won't win. We will win. And I see these young people tonight speaking. I feel so proud to see new generations who are going into my train. And I know hope is there and we will win. Thank you.
Mary Carmen, I actually hadn't noticed, but it's very true. The majority of our panel tonight was young folks, young fighters. So thank you for noticing that. It's true.
Yes. One thing, I say one thing, just one thing.
Of course.
When I wear my kafia tonight, from Venezuela to Palestine, we will be free.
Que viva Palestina. It's true. Thank you. Next up, we have a final greeting. I wanted to let folks know that I am going to be upgrading everyone. If they'd like to join, we'll do a group photo and some chanting at the end. And I just have like 2 minutes of announcements after our final greeting. So no pressure, Adrian. But Adrian Pine is joining us from the Venezuela Solidarity Network and the Friends of the Hague group to close off our greeting sections tonight.
All right. Thank you so much, Allison. Thank you for the incredible work you do every month organizing these webinars. They're so important. It was so exciting to see all of my dear friends, Andreina, Watan, Laura, Fernando, and to hear the incredibly important interventions they had today. I look forward to seeing many of you in a week in Santa Marta at the CELAC Social. As a coordinator of Friends of the Hague Group, I'll just introduce Friends of the Hague Group is an organization that launched in July at the Hague Group meetings in Bogota with the mission of providing massive social movement, global social movement support for multilateral efforts to end the genocide in Palestine and ensuring that those efforts are led by Palestinian civil society. And to that end, one of the campaigns we've been working on very strongly has been supporting Gustavo Petro's proposal to introduce a Uniting for Peace measure in the United Nations General Assembly, which has been called for by Palestinians, and that would send a protective force to Palestine, would implement sanctions, a military blockade, etc. I bring this up because, of course, one of the reasons why Trump is targeting Colombia as strongly as it is because of Petro's defense of Palestine and his solidarity with Palestine. And just as, you know, Maduro and Chavez have always been so strongly in support of Palestine, now we see that with Petro as well. And in collaborating with PINGO, the Palestinian NGO network, which is the largest representation of Palestinian civil society, representing over 140 different member organizations in the West Bank and Gaza, in the past couple of weeks, speaking with their leaderships, they are so focused on solidarity with Venezuela and Colombia right now. I mean, that is what I'm hearing from Palestine. We need to do something in solidarity with Venezuela and Colombia. And there's such clarity that this struggle is one and the same. There's such clarity that in order for Palestine to have a future of sovereignty and liberation, it is necessary for all of the world to support Venezuela and Colombia right now and make it clear to Petro in particular that introducing this resolution that will provide a possible future of sovereignty and right to return for Palestine will only make him stronger rather than weaken him in the face of this imminent war. That the people of the world will unite behind Venezuela and Colombia in this moment as they stand up for Palestine, even though it means that they are facing a military attack from the United States. So I just want to reiterate what our brilliant speakers have already said, what all of you have already touched upon these ties, and mention that the upcoming campaign that we will have as Friends of the Hague Group, led by PINGO, is a campaign of solidarity with Venezuela and Colombia as part of the fight for Palestinian liberation. So really excited to be able to be part of tying all these struggles together, and always so inspired by the Venezuelan people, the Colombian people as well, by the Bolivarian Revolution, which you have defended despite so much violence, economic and military. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Thank you again to our speakers tonight, Andreina, Fernando, Juatan, and Laura. Thank you to Adrian for helping me organize the program. I'd be amiss not to say that. And to Michelle for all of your support tonight on the technical side. We've also had excellent interpretation from Hissel, Jill, Ali, and Natalie. It will be enable us to post this webinar. It's recording in 3 languages, spread it far and wide. We really appreciate efforts through all of our fast talking and, didn't give you too much time for preparation, so we appreciate it. If anyone wants to join the group photo and I haven't sent you yet an invitation to upgrade, then please let me know. Raise your hand in the chat and we'll do some chanting in a second together and take a group photo. I also wanted to re-announce the action that James called for, which was the a meeting to talk about organizing a week of emergency protests for Venezuela and a day after action. That's going to take place on Saturday, November 1st at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And this is the link in the chat to organize and to endorse this week of action. The next Venezuela Solidarity Network webinar is going to be Tuesday, November 25th. Stay tuned for that. The topic is Women Fight Against U.S. Attacks in on Venezuela. Sorry, I'm doing multiple things at once here. Against U.S. attacks on Venezuela. And we look forward to an excellent program of women's voices against war. Then we also want to just say, if you're not a member of the Venezuela Solidarity Network or your organization has not yet joined, there is a form there that you can join our email list and also our organization. And I think those are all of my announcements. So I think we can probably go ahead and turn off the interpretation so people are able to chant with us together. You should be able, I believe, to unmute your mics if you'd like to join the chanting. I'm going to switch my view to gallery view so I can see everyone's faces. Thank you again. Everybody, let's say together, U.S. hands off Venezuela.
U.S. hands off Venezuela.
Manos fuera de Venezuela.
Manos fuera de Venezuela.
Someone wants to say that in Portuguese. I don't know it. Anyone? Hands off Venezuela. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you at the next picket. Thank you again to the interpreters, all the speakers. We will work together to build a broader and more united movement in solidarity with Venezuela and the people of Latin America and the Caribbean, currently in the targets of U.S. empire. Que viva Venezuela.
Que viva.
Que viva Colombia. Que viva Palestina.
Que viva.